Hello and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have a great time today. We're going to take a trip around the state of Florida. Obviously, we've had some good weather in parts of the state this week and some that's not so good. I want to know how the fishing's been in both. We're going to start up in Northeast Florida where Captain David Voorhees lives, find out how his fishing's been. I know he's on the water even as we speak. And we're going to work our way all the way down the East Coast, through the Florida Keys, up the West Coast, out the Panhandle, talking to the best captains in each area to get their take on how fishing is. And I've also got a question for the guys that I want you to think about if you're an offshore fisherman. All right, it sounds like a crazy idea. Would you like to turn GPS off? Well, of course we wouldn't. But stop and think a minute. What if we opened up red snapper, we went back to the 2 per person over 20 inches rule that was working so well, and we opened the snapper back up, but we turned off the GPS? And you had to find your old bottom spots the old way. Now, obviously, everybody in the commercial shipping industry and the Coast Guard and all them, they'd, of course, still have GPS. I'm really only talking about turning it off for recreational fishermen or boaters. I don't think I'd like it, but if it would give me a chance to go catch more red snapper, or at least some, and more of other bottom fish because they weren't getting hit so hard, just a thought. We'll see what the boys think. The Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast is brought to you this week and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. Oh, it's the best chum on earth, all right. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. By Young Boats. You want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. By the Castaway Hat Company. That's the hat that's helping save our seas. And by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Right stuff, low price, every day. We're going to start things up in the northeast corner of Florida where flounder season has reopened. Remember now, we're past December 1st, so we now do have a flounder season. Let's see how that and everything else is going with one Captain David Voorhees. How we doing, Skip?
Hey, Captain Ricky, how's it going, buddy?
It's going very well. I'm still in Thanksgiving mode, still counting my blessings. Haven't even scratched the surface.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm thankful we got flounder season back open. A lot of guys are reporting some good numbers on flounder. Now, this is a time of year where these flounder would move to the main part of the river and start filtering out to the Atlantic Ocean. But with that being said, you know, a lot of your good flounders are going to be caught in the river, but don't hesitate to fish the creek mouth because there's still a lot of good flounders along the intercoastal at these creek mouths on the outgoing tide. There are finger mullets around, Rick. You might not see them in the numbers we were seeing them earlier, but there's still patches of finger mullet here and there. Water quality, I'm not too happy with that. It's still a little dirty. I wish it would clear up. I'm ready for colder water temperatures, the wintertime clear fishing on the mud flat. We're not there yet. We're not there yet at all. The water's still a little stained, a little dirty, a little muddy, but we're still catching good numbers of red and good numbers of trout. Or I shouldn't say good numbers of trout, good quality trout. It seems like the trout we're catching now are of good quality. I'm talking 16, 17, 18, and even saw and heard of some 19-inch trout being caught this week. This is a good time of the year to catch trout because they're not rode up, they're not spawning. This isn't their spawning season, but this is a good time to catch some good quality fish. And usually when you get on them, they really bite good. Now, I'm a big component of going to minnows this time of year. What I mean, the mud minnows. I like the mud minnows. I'll still have shrimp with me, but a lot of times when I go out, I'm going to probably have more mud minnows than I am shrimp. I like the action of the mud minnows. It's going to give me a little bit more action. Still some good reds. The higher tide right now, and this is time of the year, And we always sort of see this. Summertime, we like that last of the outgoing tide. This time of year, I tend to do better, Rick, on that higher tide. I like that last hour of the incoming tide and then that first 2 hours of the outgoing tide. And I like to fish, yes, on the mud flats and, yes, up close to the grass in the mouth of these little feeder creeks that are emptying the grass marshes into the intercoastal.
I gotcha. David, I agree with you 100%. It's also a very good time of year for catch and release trout fishing because this cooler water helps them out quite a bit, doesn't it, in terms of stress on the fish?
Much better. Yes, absolutely. They do have a much better way, much better chance of surviving in this cooler water.
Yeah, yep, I agree. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I hope you get the cooler water you want soon, but it's certainly improving and seems to be. Oh, speaking of quality fish, how about a report we got from just across the Georgia line this week of a 17-pound flounder? That's as big a one as I've ever seen, Cap.
That's a stud. That's a stud. I've gotten them in the 10-pound, right at 10 pounds. I haven't gotten any. The biggest one I have actually seen in person was a 17, 18-pounder. And let me tell you, when you see a monster like that, you don't forget it. They are truly a magnificent. When they get over that 10-pound range, and you see one come up beside the boat, if that doesn't get your ticker going, nothing will.
I got you. David, we appreciate it as always. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Absolutely, Ricky. Looking forward to it. And I'm not so crazy about colder water. I want some cleaner water. I'm ready for the clean water to be here.
Well, don't those kind of go hand in hand this time of year?
They do. Yeah. Absolutely, they do. Yep.
Well, I'm ready for both of them. Cap, we appreciate it. We'll talk with you next week.
Tight lines, Ricky.
Okay. Captain David Voorhees. All right, it's East Central time. It's time to check in with the man that knows every single fish in the Mosquito Lagoon on a first-name basis, Captain Jim Ross. Jimmy, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Rick. I don't know if I can live up to that billing, but I'll give it a heck of a try.
Well, there might be one or two new ones that slipped in on you, but you know most of them. Most of them are wearing the scars of your hooks. I happen to know that.
I would imagine I've caught quite a few of them over and over and over again, and that's the fun thing about catch and release is that you do get to be able to put those fish back, and then sometime later you can obviously go back and have a chance at catching them again. And I have one fish that we used to call in a school that we used to call the Railroad Bridge School. It was a school of big redfish that hung around the west side of the railroad bridge up in the Titusville area in the Indian River, and they would run from there all the way up to Flounder Creek and back. But most of the time they were somewhere from about right around where the bend in the channel is, where it goes from north and south and then goes east-west as it's going to Haulover.
Uh-huh.
You drew a line straight to the west bank and then went from there south to the drawbridge. You could pretty much find those fish on just about any given day. And the neat thing about that is I caught the same fish out of that school 3 times, and it had a specific mark on its tail. Each time it was obviously slightly bigger, but it had a spot that was not completely enclosed. It looked almost like a C. Mm-hmm. And so it was very distinctive. And just so yeah, it's interesting. Catch and release does work. And I've got a whole bunch of new ones. 15,000 redfish were put into the Banana River by CCA here about a month ago now.
How about that?
Yeah, Release the East is working. So congratulations to them for getting those fish spawned out and then obviously letting the fry grow large enough to that 4 to 6 inch size range to where they could put them back in the water, and they weren't getting predated by everything. Once they get a little bit bigger and they start becoming predators themselves, and they can survive a little bit better. And that's what's really nice about the way that they've handled that particular release. So I've got 15,000 new friends to make.
All right, hold on. I'm going to stop you right here. I want to know more about this. Okay, what they did is they caught the brood stock, spawned them, and then let them grow up?
Yes, we local guides, myself, Troy Perez, oh, God, I can't name all there was 5 or 6 of us, my son, John Lulay, just a bunch of different guys. We went out CCA brought over tanker trucks, and we caught these redfish, put them in big Ingle coolers with oxygen bottles attached to them, took them back to the boat ramp, transported them from the Ingle coolers into the transport truck, the big tanker truck. They took them back over to Duke Laboratories, spawned them out, and this year those redfish are now the first group of the spawn is now 4 to 6 inches, and they're releasing them in the Volusia County, Brevard County, Indian River County, St. Lucie County, and one other down that way. For now, they're putting 10 to 15,000 redfish fingerlings in each of those places, and they're also going to do it all the way down to Biscayne Bay. And the reason that we had to catch them on the East Coast and then transport them to the West Coast is because West Coast stock and East Coast stock are slightly genetically different.
Right.
And so all of that restocking that's been going on the West Coast for years and years now, those guys over there have been benefiting from it. So now the guys on this side are benefiting from what CCA is doing. So one of the things that, we like to promote is organizations that are helping us. And CCA, with this Release the East initiative on these redfish, is helping in a huge way because they're putting, I don't know, 10 to 15,000 times 5 or 6 different locations. Do the math. There's a lot of fingerlings being put in. So for, $35 or $40 a month, I don't want it to sound like a CCA commercial, but for $35 or $40, not a month, but a year, you can be a CCA member and help be a part of that. So it's a really cool thing to be able to do. They're giving back, and they need help to give back. So your dollars go straight to helping with projects like that.
I've got one word. I got one word for you, Jimmy.
What's that?
Cobia.
Yes.
Let's do it.
So they're talking about doing trout. They're talking about doing flounder. And I know cobia and dolphin have been successly farm raised, and so that is something that we can definitely look at doing in the future.
Yeah.
That would be awesome as well.
They do that. They do that down at my University of Miami at their science school. They're selling cobia overseas, and that they're raising in pens, in big floating pens in Indonesia somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where, but it's a commercial investment over there. It's a commercial harvest. But Jimmy,
nice.
I got to tell you, you mentioned the scars on your fish. I take
Yes.
so much knowledge, I guess you'd have to call it, from the number of fish that we do catch, redfish in the intercoastal largely. Jimmy, they've all got hook holes in their mouth. We're fishing a very, very finite resource, and we need to understand that.
Well, so going back to the original start of the show, or this original start of this particular segment, that school known as the Railroad Fish School, or the Railroad School of Fish, those were all 38 to 45-inch brood stock fish. There was about 225 of those fish on an average on any given day when I first started fishing this fish back in the 94, 95, 96, 1994, 95, 96 time frame as a guide, as when I first started out. And those fish were pretty reliable. They weren't clockwork, but they were pretty reliable. And on most days, I could find them. At some point in time during the day, I would find them in that western side of the Indian River Lagoon. Through mishandling of fish, taking the fish out, hold them out of the water for way too long. If you hold a fish out of the if you hold a fish out of the water more than 30 seconds, do this. When you pick the fish up out of the water to unhook him and take the picture of him, I want you guys and gals out there taking a deep breath and hold your breath while you're doing that. Hold the fish up for the photo and then put the fish back in the water. If you can do it in the same amount of time that you can hold your breath, then that fish is probably not going to go back harmed. But I see guys picking them up, hanging them by the lip on boga grips, dropping them in the bottom of the boat 2, 3, 4, 5 times sometimes, and it's just, you're beating the resource up. And I don't want to be one of those bashers because everybody loves that hero shot. We all love catching that big fish and getting the hero shot of it. But if you will do that, if you do that one thing, take a big inhale, and as long as you can hold your breath, that's as long as that fish should be out of the water.
Jim, I hate to argue with you, but you're wrong.
I'm wrong.
You know how you're wrong?
How's that?
because before you hold your breath, you first have to run a marathon. Because that's what
Yes.
that's what the fish just did. You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, you were right about that. But those 225 fish started turning into 150 fish, and then they turned into 75 fish, and then all of a sudden it turned into 25 fish. And now those fish are no longer there. And there's two reasons. One, there was a group of guys that were poaching them on a regular basis that were waiting. Yeah, they were wading across the railroad tracks from their trailer or their house or wherever they lived there in Eastern Mims. And, you know, Mims stands for Mom is my sister.
Careful.
So you can understand where we're going with this. Not pointing any fingers, but those guys, I would see them out there all the time poaching these big broodstock fish. Now, a 40-inch redfish is somewhere around 15 years old, guys and gals, 15 to 18 years old. That's how long it takes a redfish to grow to 40 inches. So you can imagine if two guys go out there and they each catch a redfish, well, let's just say they caught 2 apiece a week and they kept them. That's 4 fish a week. Multiply that by 52 weeks, the whole school's gone.
Yeah, I know it.
With two guys wiped out a whole school.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that those were the only 2 guys. I'm just saying those are 2 of the guys that I saw doing it most frequently. But there were a lot of people out there that were keeping these fish or mishandling the fish. And so they would put them back in the water and the fish would eventually succumb to the oxygen deprivation. They would cramp. It's another thing. When you're putting your redfish back in the water, be very, very careful with those fish and make sure. I always take my redfish and I bend them one way and then bend them the other way. It's like you and I stretching. Okay, if you get a Charlie horse and you can't walk because you've got a Charlie horse in your hamstring or in your calf, you guys and gals all know how that feels. Redfish, all fish actually, will do exactly the same thing. So when you put a redfish in the water and you're holding him by the tail and you're kind of swishing him around back and forth, if he bends one way but he doesn't bend the other way, physically take your hand, put it over his snout, and physically hold his tail and lightly stretch him in the opposite direction. And when you release him again, holding him by the tail, he should be able to swim naturally with his head going to either side, left and right, like he would be going down, swimming through the water. If he's still only going to one side, do it again. Stretch him out a little bit more. He's got a Charlie horse or a cramp, and that's gonna eliminate his ability to be able to swim and then get oxygen back across his gills. And that's what we find is that when we have a big weekend where guys got out and the bite was good and they caught a bunch of fish, we'd show back up as guides on Monday morning and there's 5 or 6 or 8 fish floating, dead. Or laying on, sometimes you'd be pulling down the flat and you see them laying on the bottom, upside down, dead, because they weren't handled properly. And so, it's one of those things. The resource is a very finite resource, as you said. And so we really need to take care of every single fish. If that fish isn't going home for consumption, give him every possible chance to let him get out there and, be a productive citizen as a fish, if you will, in the waterways for the next guy to come along and hopefully catch.
Well said, my boy. Well said. Jimmy, we appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
I look forward to it. Next week, we'll actually talk about fish because there's a lot of fish being caught right now.
What are they All right, give me a quick one. What are they catching, Jimmy? I didn't mean to get off topic.
Not a problem. Run down on the offshore. The guys that are getting out to the reefs between 130 and 180 feet are getting vermilion snapper, mutton snapper, mangrove snapper. Of course, plenty of red snapper in there as well. The grouper bite right now is off the chain.
Really?
27 fathom ridge. Yeah, 27 fathom ridge. And the cones, I talked with Captain Greg on the Sea Leveler the other day. Those guys absolutely had some studs. I'm talking 35-pound, nice big gag grouper. Live croakers and live pinfish seem to be the best baits. If you can find pogies, they'll work as well.
Good deal. How about inshore?
Inshore, the redfish bite's been primarily on dead cut bait in the Banana and Indian rivers. When you get up towards New Smyrna and Oak Hill, the water's a little cleaner. Paddle tails, because there's a bunch of fingerling mullet in there, and they're chasing those fingerling mullets. So paddle tails that imitate those fingerlings are doing good. Natural colors, where the water's a little cleaner. As you get sort of south of Oak Hill down into the lagoon proper, go with something with a chartreuse tail. That seems to be working best.
Bingo. Thanks, Jimmy. We appreciate it.
Take care, Rick.
All right, Captain Jim Ross from East Central Florida with a great report and lots of advice about redfish. How exciting is that they let 15,000 new redfish go? It's pretty cool, and I want to expand that. Let's put some more Kobe in the water. Funk and Wagnalls defines symmetry as similar parts combined in perfect balance. Shimano and Strike Zone defines symmetry as the perfect spinning combo for whatever you target this spring. You can't beat the balance and performance of the Shimano Symmetry spinners for freshwater and inshore saltwater. Outfits like Symmetry are the reason for shopping at Strike Zone. Not only are the Shimano Symmetry spinners the perfect balance between rod and reel, they're also on sale at Strike Zone for $99. You know, one of the biggest mistakes most anglers make is fishing outfits that are out of balance. If you try to balance your own Shimano outfit, you almost can't get the most out of your cast inshore or put the maximum pressure on a sea monster offshore. The symmetry between Strike Zone and Shimano, the perfect balance for all your fishing needs. All right, thanks to Jim Ross for a great East Central report. Now, let's roll into Miami and find the mayor of all things fishing in Miami, Florida, Captain Ray Rocher. Cap, how we doing?
Good. How are you, Rick?
Good, good. Are you out of a tree for a while? If you quit?
I am, just for a little bit.
You'll be going back soon, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, I tell you. Now, you do most of your hunting in Georgia or Florida?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
Anywhere that somebody will let me go.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not scared of a deer in any state.
Yeah. I know Georgia, I think it's January 9th. I think we get till then.
8th.
8th?
Yeah,
okay.
8th this year, yeah. My wife and I are going to Missouri in a couple of weeks. That'll be fun. And, see where we go. I don't know. I might make Alabama, anything I can do to get in the woods. And then it's after hunting season, it's just wide open fishing. So
yep.
I'm happy with that.
I understand. How have your boats done this week?
Pretty good. I fished 2 boats today, 2 boats yesterday. I was on a boat called the Wheeze and the Keys for the tournament with my family. My son was one of the crew, and my wife was one of the anglers. They were kind enough to let the whole family show up, and we had a lot of fun. Caught a couple sails, and 5 fish won the tournament, so we needed a couple more bites to end up somewhere, but we had a lot of fun doing it. It was really good. We just saw those 2 fish.
Yeah, I've always thought it was pretty cool. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Wheeze and the Keys team is a family that fishes those tournaments together quite a bit, don't they?
Scott Robbins is the owner of the 58 Merit, and I actually ran his boat one season and have been with him as a deckhand all over the place, Bermuda, and he and I fished Canada together, and, pretty much a lot of Bahama trips, and just a real fun family. His wife, Debbie's wonderful, and, Captain Zig, he's just the best. So we just have a lot of fun.
Yep. I fished alongside them off of Boat Harbor in one of the tournaments, and they were a fun group. Cap, tell me what's going on other than the handful of sailfish for you.
Well, the current's been a little slow, so whenever the current's slow here, we focus on bottom fishing. And today they caught some almaco jacks and snappers, and a handful of dolphin, triple tail. Just kind of mixed it up. Not a lot going on in the sailfish scene yet. Yesterday, our 43 footer was in the tournament also, and they went down to Ocean Reef. And they ended up seeing, 5 fish, had 3 bites, caught 1. So, just came up a little short, but it was, kind of interesting down there. There was a little bit more life, more kingfish, just a lot more activity, some sailfish showering. They saw 3 fish on the showers, and got 1 bite out of those, and got a few bites on the kite. So, it was decent fishing down there. Just they were by themselves hoping to swing for the fence and something to break loose. They just needed a little bit more luck, and they'd have been in good shape.
Ray, I'm telling you, and I'm really starting to believe this is true because I've seen it multiple years now. That migration of fish that I lived for to make it to Fort Pierce the last week of the year. And we fished a little tournament down there every year, and I loved it so much. Those fish are here now, Ray. They're off Jacksonville. Yeah. A friend of mine had one, buddy of mine had 4 yesterday on his charter. They were not sailfish fishing. They were pulling bigger baits for wahoo. Buddy of mine was 5 for 9 the day before that. He was sailfish fishing. But no, there's more sailfish off of Jacksonville right now than there is Miami.
Yeah, 100%. There were 50 boats out basically, and I want to say 45 fish caught. So average of less than one fish per boat. It was somewhere right in that ballpark. And and I'm telling you, it was an 8-line tournament, and this is the first tournament of the season. They call it the Dust 'em Off Ben Sharp's tournament, and usually it takes a lot more than that to win it. There's usually 100 plus fish caught, and it just was tough. And the other interesting thing is this tournament had no boundaries, so no north-south boundaries. So somebody ran way north and didn't find them, and the boat that won it was right off Jupiter Inlet, a little bit north of Jupiter Inlet, and he had 5 bites and caught them all. And then the second place boat was the old number 7, Jamie.
Oh yeah.
He was off the Juneau Ledge. He caught 4, and then a couple boats had 3, and then it was all 2s. So, just not a lot of fish. I mean, guys had tons of bait. I mean, we had the best baits. We had greenies bigger than your hand, and you could hardly get your hand around them. And beautiful goggle eyes. Zig did a great job with bait, and we had 100 ballyhoo. So we had the Golden Corral out there. 8 lines, by the way, 8 rods.
All right. Well, next year we'll tie you up between my dock and the dock just east of me. We'll put the Wheeze and the Keys there. Okay.
Sounds like a plan to me.
We'll throw air mattresses on the floor. You guys can all sleep in the house, and you'll go home with 25 releases when everybody else has got 3. Hey, let me ask you a question. You mentioned your bottom fishing, and this sounds like an insane idea, but it's been stirring around in my head lately. Ray, we're never going to get red snapper squared away. As long as we have a South Atlantic Council, the red snapper rules are going to be ridiculous. Would you be willing to have GPS turned off for the recreational fishermen to be able to, obviously, guys like yourself who know the bottom like the back of your hand would catch more fish, but have we made it too easy? Do we need to step back a little and maybe say, no, I don't want that Seymour map, or no, I don't want that GPS? Do we need to make things tougher?
Well, if you could figure out a way to take away everybody's cell phone, because so many guys today have navionics, and yesterday we're fishing. Scott's telling me where we are in relation to the wreck, looking at his phone. If you could figure out a way to eliminate all that, I am not scared of no electronics, because that's how we started out. It was all shore ring, because in Miami we're close to shore, so it was all shore lineups or compass bearing and time and distance, and you paid a lot of attention to your machine. And I remember fishing with guys like Buddy Carey would be riding. I remember one day we're riding down, trolling groupers with wire lines and 30, 40 feet of water. And mid-sentence, he had no electronics to speak of. Mid-sentence, he points at a little rock that looked like 10 other rocks. And he goes, on that rock this time of year, we usually get a black or a gag. I said, really? Yeah. He goes, yeah, it's supposed to be some kind of special rock there. And we trolled around it. Boom, got one on one wire. And the mate, Bobby Jenkins, immediately ran to the other wire and started whining because Buddy slowed down, So he kept the lure, kept the feather and a bait coming. Boom, double header.
I'll be darned.
And I swear to you, we caught a black and a gag off the rock, as Buddy said, with no electronics. So that's an extreme example of what not having electronics does for you. It makes you pay attention to shore lineups. And even in that case, I think we were on kind of a nondescript section of the mangroves. And I think Buddy was just memorizing the rocks. Mm-hmm. And I remember a guy named Tom Harris did the same thing down in Key Largo when I first started this. It was early 80s. And they just, we didn't have much for electronics. Loran C was the best thing we had. We started out even without that in the late 70s. So, you just learn how to, it's almost like you lose one of your faculties. They say if you're blind, you learn how to pay attention to noises and other things.
That's right.
It's kind of like that. You compensate. And I think that's what we used to do when we didn't have all the benefits and advantages we have today. And so that obviously doesn't scare me, but I just don't know how you stop technology. I don't know that's almost like getting red snapper rules balanced out. So I don't know which one's harder to come by.
I do know that if you reach 60 feet of water and then you go 6 sand hills and turn due south on the drop off of the 6th sand hill, that's where the Jack's Beach wreck is. I know that much.
There you go.
Cap,
you were paying attention.
Yep, I appreciate it ever so much. I look forward to talking with you next week.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Ray. Captain Ray Rocher. All right, thanks to Ray Rocher for a great report out of Miami, although the sail fishing, pretty tough for him over the weekend. Man, when he's catching one or two, I know one thing, I need to be tied to the dock. Let's head on down to Islamorada and check in with Captain Brandon Storen. Brandon, how are you?
I'm great, Rick. How you been?
Good. Tell me about your fishing this week.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some wind, but there's been still some good fishing around. Been having a really good steady snook bite, a few redfish mixed in with them. And as far as offshore, yeah, they're not seeing a ton of sails. They're catching a few sailfish here and there, but really not a big wave of them down here yet, by all means. But the mutton fishing was really good, as well as, yellowtails. There's some nice big yellowtails around. Tunas have been biting as well. And that's pretty much what we've been looking at. It's also, been a lot of mackerel down, a lot of king mackerel, zero mackerels, and we'll soon start to see some Spanish mackerels in the bay as well.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, do you guys get zeros almost all year?
Almost, but, but mostly, from the fall all the way through the spring, pretty much in the heat of summer, we really don't get too many of them. But, I mean, we started seeing plenty of them as soon as, early October, and I know they'll stick around until May.
Buddy, I'll tell you right now, I will eat me a zero mackerel in a minute. Don't confuse him with a kingfish. That's a whole different animal.
For sure. Oh yeah, I always tell people all the time that I would put them up right next to wahoo.
Yeah, I would too. Certainly would. And in case, just so people will know, the way to tell the difference between a zero and a Spanish is a zero has a solid lateral line, right?
Yes, they have a solid line instead of the spots that the Spanish have.
Right. And man, it is one outstanding eating fish. So your sailfish have been a little slow. Anybody night timing or daytime and swords? Either one?
Yeah. Well, we've been doing daytime sorting, and we've been getting a few swordfish. It's been pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question. All right, if we could catch more fish, if it meant we would catch more fish and loosen some of our tough limits, like red snapper is the one that affects us so much up here, would you be in favor of turning off the GPS for a few years for recreational fishing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if it means more fish, then I'm in favor for anything.
Well, here's what bothers me.
You can name it.
Yeah. Here's what bothers me, Brandon. If a doctor retires from Massachusetts tomorrow and moves down here, and he buys a 25-foot center console with twin outboards and a trolling motor with spot lock and a Seymour map, he's instantly a good fisherman. He can see the whole bottom of the ocean. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's just...
I do.
Have we gotten too much technology?
I agree but disagree.
Okay.
Because we do get a lot of people down here who bring their own boats down Florida Keys. It's very popular. Even people just from the mainland of Florida. And there's some people I will go on their boat and, as like a captain to hire. And I tell you what, they go out there by themselves and they struggle. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe catch like some barely legal yellowtails, which, that I think almost anyone could do down here. But then I get on the boat and then we have a great day. So I agree but disagree. I agree there's too much technology out there and that we do have, I mean, the trolling motor is, for me, like the best invention of all time. But
Yep.
It really is. But I don't really agree that just because you give someone all the tools that they're not going to be a great fisherman. And I think that I've seen that firsthand. When people come down here, they bring their boat down, for the week or whatever, and then they're blowing up my phone like, oh my God, like I can't do anything right. Like, can you help me out a little bit? Like, throw me a bone here, So I think that a good fisherman is a good fisherman, and it doesn't matter if you have all the tools or not.
Brandon, that is very well said, and I think in a lot of cases you're right. You can have all the tools, doesn't mean you have all the knowledge. Cap, we appreciate it as always. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Absolutely.
I look forward to it.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils.
What?
Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat Facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Our thanks to Brandon Storn for a great report from the Keys. Now we're going to head west, hit 10,000 Islands, check in with Steve Dahl. And Steve, my first question is, do you have warmer water right now than you had this time last year?
About 4 or 5 degrees.
Wow,
Yep.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It is. It's that. This is the reason these snook have been staying around so long, because they love that warmer water, which is fine, but very not typical of November, December. It's just very odd. I don't know why. I don't know if it was due to the hurricane, just bringing them warmer water into the area and it's sustaining itself. But air temperatures have been significantly. Well, not significantly, but probably about 4 or 5 degrees, more on average. We're in the mid 80s, 84, 85 degrees air temperatures, and we should be in that upper 70, low 80 range consistently as highs, and we're just not getting those cool mornings. So our water temp is up a little bit, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's affecting our fishing, and you're right, you've got more snook than you should have now. Now, do you generally see cobia this time of year?
We do, and there has been. That's one thing I wanted to talk about. We definitely our nearshore bite's starting to really pick up. So, and when I say nearshore, I mean some of these fish can be caught, as close as 4 miles, and the cobia have shined, and they're big, and lots of fish in that mid to upper 30-inch class right now. Not uncommon to get multiples within a given day, and it's all on pretty much hard bottom, so rocky reefs. A lot of the wrecks and reefs in our area have shifted a little bit to if you got something that you normally fish, you may want to spend some time on your graph and just really kind of figure it out, because a lot of stuff has shifted a bit due to Hurricane Ian. So nothing tragic, nothing's kind of really decimated, but some things, I'm guessing a lot of things have silted in. I'm hearing a lot of stuff from the offshore guys, like the true offshore guys, they're grouper fishing. A lot of the ledges, which are really prominent in our area, subtle, maybe 75 to 125 feet of water, and it could be a 2-foot wedge, and it'll be stacked with grouper or snapper, things of that avail, and those things have kind of gotten silted in. So that doesn't take much if it's only 2-3 feet. But also shows you very much the power of hurricanes. You're talking about a wedge that's only 2-3 feet deep and 125 feet of water, and it's covered up.
Yeah, but won't it, if I'm not mistaken now, hold on, if it covered that ledge, does it not uncover a ledge somewhere else that runs in a different direction?
This is exactly my point of, if you have, I know everybody wants you to get out and fish, but, I think the fun of this, and if there is a silver lining in all of this is, whether it's inshore, trying to figure out how the sandbars have shifted or what mangrove lines are still healthy, or, are the wrecks, fully, vertical, or have they listed to a side, or are these, all these spots, how have they changed? And understand that we have a ton of debris still in our water. We still have debris in our water from Hurricane Irma 5 years ago.
Yeah,
and,
so do we.
And this changes things. One in particular thing is 2 years after Hurricane Irma in 2019, we were catching triple tail in 3-4 feet of water off brush piles.
Sure. Yeah.
Something we never thought we would ever do. So this is, the silver lining of, it's frustrating because you might have a spot, but you've heard me say it a million times, Rick. I hate fishing memory. I love to fish the moment. This is a perfect example of that, of fishing the moment. This is what Mother Nature has given us. Let's go figure it out. And to me, figuring out the puzzle is the fun of this.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. It's to me, if we start catching fish on a bottom spot, I'm going to move real soon. I'm not going to take very many off of it, partly because I don't want to hurt the spot, mostly because every trip, if I'm far enough offshore into waters that aren't fished that often, I'm going to stumble over something brand new. And I mean, there's always, let's face it, all your wrecks have been torn up and moved around. There's some piece of a wreck right now, Steve Dahl, that is accumulating fish that will accumulate them for quite a while until somebody finds it as a brand new wreck in a brand new spot.
100%. And that could be something sustainable for years, and that's, kind of where I'm at. So, fish in and around your favorite spots, but take some time as you're approaching or exiting your spots, to really be looking at your sonar, because, a lot of things may surprise you.
Great advice. Steve, we appreciate it as always. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Oh, I can't wait.
I look forward to it every week. Thanks, Steve. Captain Steve Dahl. I'll bet you don't even remember the days that all us cool kids would rub baby oil mixed with iodine to help us get even darker in the summertime. Being burnt was cool, and even if you weren't a surfing legend, you sure looked the part. Oh, man, if a bunch of us old guys paid the price for our vanity. We never knew the skin problem and health damage that awaited us. Today's fishermen have the options of being so much healthier in the sun than we ever thought of. Thanks in no small part to the Castaway Hat Company, who not only provides our podcasters with Castaway straw hats, but they make the coolest prints on the underside of the brims you ever saw. You may think your bimini top or T-top blocks the sun, but as an awful lot of us OGs can tell you, you can't have enough protection from sun damage. Do what we do. Put on the sunblock and put on your Castaway straw hat. You'll look the part of today's best anglers, and you'll even be helping the environment. That's because for each Castaway hat sold, the Castaway Company is going to pay to have 1 pound of trash removed from our waterways. The burning Florida sun won't be raced in your skin, and believe me, when you age a few years, you'll thank us old guys with a lifetime on the water. So go to CastawayHatCo.com and get your best sun protection today. The Castaway Hat Company. They've got a hat for every adventure. Our thanks to Steve Dahl for a good 10,000 Islands report. I hadn't even thought about that, but the hurricane coming through there is devastating as that was to that area. it's going to change everything offshore. There's going to be new spots and spots that you used to have that you're never going to see again. Interesting. Now, let's move up to West Central and check in with Captain Grumpy Markham. Grumpy, how are you?
Tired and grumpy. Yeah.
I don't know why that nickname fits you tonight. I just felt that coming. What's going on with your fishing, Skip?
Well, I wish I could say I've got some real good news, but unfortunately I don't. Red tide is
no.
It seems to be getting worse again.
No.
It's been kind of flaring up for the last couple of weeks, but now it's to the point where there's lots of fish kills again, and we're right back where we were 4 years ago. So
that's not good.
Am I tired and grumpy?
Yeah, I understand it now. You think it's going to be that bad?
It's not good. I mean, to start with, we were already in a fishery that was just trying to barely recover, and this weekend there was a redfish tournament, and there were, I don't know the exact number of entries. I think there were 59 or 56, something like that. Anglers entered in the redfish tournament, and of those, probably some of the best redfish anglers going. I believe there were somewhere around 16 people that caught fish, period.
No.
Caught redfish.
That's terrible.
I mean, and that's pathetic. And that's after, for most of them, a week-long scouting.
Wow. That's really terrible. Yeah, I am really sorry to hear that. It's obviously covers a very big territory because those guys in the tournament will run a long ways to catch redfish now.
Yeah, they will. That's the unfortunate part too.
That is, now, doesn't cold water usually help with that?
I recall as a kid growing up, the only time we seemed to have red tide was in the summertime.
Right.
Anymore, that's not the case.
Okay.
I don't understand what's going on, other than the fact that there's a whole lot more pollution going on. We're losing seagrasses at a rate that we can't even fathom, and nobody seems to quite get a grasp on all the things that are going on that are wrong. I can't put a finger on one specific thing, but I'm telling you, the municipalities that border Tampa Bay need to wake up, because they're killing the goose that laid the golden egg.
Yeah.
I honestly believe prior to the hurricane coming, a lot of these folks knew what we were in for with regard to a rain event, etc. And anytime we've had a rain event, most of the time what's happened is that they've taken to dumping sewage to lower levels, to a point where it's not going to cause things backing up, inshore, inland, etc. It's just not the way to handle it. We have been lax in taking care of infrastructure, and look at the number of people moving here.
Yeah.
It's out of control.
1,600 people a day move to Florida. I know. I know. Well, that's not quite. I understand why you're grumpy now. That's not quite the report I expected, but it is a necessary report. If you're thinking about going redfish in Tampa Bay right now, don't. That's the report.
Yeah.
And Ray, please keep us abreast of it. We'll check in with you next week, and hopefully you'll have some better news.
Yes, sir. I sure hope so.
Thank you, Ray.
Have a great day.
Captain Ray Markham with a really disturbing report from Tampa Bay. Holy smokes, we don't need another red tide. Hey, it's finally fall, and how many of us have been waiting for the magic of the mullet run to start? There are literally miles of mullet moving along just about every area of Florida coastline. What you need to cash in on the tarpon, snook, reds, trout, sharks, etc. that are feeding on the poor fingerlings is the perfect mullet imitation. Well, for my money, you can skip all the high-dollar made-in-China mullet imitators. For me and all the podcasters I've talked with, the perfect mullet imitation is made right here in Stuart, Florida, and it's the D.O.A. Bait Buster. Mark Nichols, the owner and manufacturer of D.O.A., spent years designing different bait busters to swim shallow, medium, or deep. What makes the bait buster so special? I'll tell you what I think. I think it's the tail. If your bait buster is moving, the tail is flapping. No predator can stand that tail flapping in his face. The D.O.A. Bait Buster. It's the perfect mullet run bait. All right, well, God, I wish we'd have had better news from Ray Markham, but we didn't. But let's talk to Captain Sunshine himself. We will go to the mayor of Homosassa. William Tony, please tell me that red tide hadn't made it up there.
Nope, no signs of it that I know of anywhere, up on the Big Bend area. Our fishing's been great. We had a little bit of a front that came through. It kind of, in the full moon effect, kind of, slowed the bite for a couple days.
Right.
But right now, the gag grouper are coming in, and the offshore guys have not mentioned anything about red tide offshore of us at Homosassa, and certainly not inshore of us. And trout bites been really good, and what I've been telling most anglers, what they need to do is move up into the deeper creeks. They're still a little bit on the outside edge, but I'm finding them more in the deeper creeks or little depressions and holes that are about 3 or 4 foot deep, and they're more concentrated there, so you can catch them pretty quickly.
Gotcha. All right. What else have you seen? I'm assuming that your grouper thing is drawn to a close here pretty soon, right?
Yep, end of the month is the last of the grouper season. Right now, the hot bite is about 16 miles out, so that's roughly, say 16 to 22 foot of water. So foot per mile on our area.
Yep.
Catching a lot of fish trolling right now, so that's a good way to get them and a fun way. Some of the top colors have been just the old plain redhead with a white body.
That'll never work.
Yeah.
That'll never work.
Yeah. Well, tell those grouper on the table I saw they shouldn't have ate that thing, So
that old red and white mirror lure 52M, that'll never work.
Yeah, it'll never work. It's this old common 2-color thing there. But no, it's got a lot of fish. But, back inshore in state waters, there's still a few keeper fish being caught, and using shallow running casting plugs like the Rapala F18s and Rapala F14 balsa plugs. So they run pretty shallow, but the harder you crank them, the deeper they'll run, about 6 or 7 foot. And I always suggest to people, do not throw directly over the top of the structure. Throw it right off to the side of it, so that way when the fish runs out, you at least got them that further away from the rock. I've seen a lot of big fish get lost when you throw right over the top. They jump on it so quick, you don't have time to react. Next thing you know, they're down in there, and there goes your $20 plug.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they've got a plan. When a grouper fills that hook, he's got game. He's got a plan.
Absolutely.
Well,
and other thing here in our area, now remember our snook season is now over, so no more keeping snook, but we're still finding them on the outside edges, and redfish, of course, are on the outside. Look for jumping mullet on the western-facing points. Been getting a lot of them on live shrimp. They seem like they're eating that a little bit better than, say, pinfish.
Outstanding. Well, William, that's a great report. I am so glad to hear that you don't have the red tide, and I pray that you don't get it. Cap,
I hope we don't.
And Cap, we so appreciate what you're doing, working with the estuary thing. We got the good news from Jim Ross over on the East Coast today that CCA just released 15,000 redfish,
awesome.
6 to 8 inch redfish in the Mosquito Lagoon. So that's great news, and I'm hoping we expand that project. I'd like to see a lot more fish released.
Yep, fish and more seagrass, and that's why I'm flying out to New Orleans to speak at the Restore America's Estuary Conference and tell them about the Big Bend Aquatic Seagrass Preserve that I was a part of. But that's what makes fishing good, is our good grass.
Indeed it does. We're learning more about that every day because we've destroyed too much of it. Thank you, William. We'll talk with you next week.
See you next week, bud.
All right, buddy. Can't get out of Florida without going through Destin and Pensacola, and that's where Tyler Massey is large and in charge. What's happening, Captain Tyler?
Hey, Rick, how are you guys?
I'm doing excellent, buddy. Any fish biting out there?
Yeah, so we've had a pretty good last couple of weeks. The weather's been decent. Still, it's cool, but not cold yet. The cold fronts been coming through, and it's been cold for a day, then kind of warms back up. So it's making a little bit of the inshore fishing a little more tricky. It's kind of throwing off our wintertime pattern a little bit. Still find plenty of fish in the canals. And then when it warms up, though, even in the mouths of the canal. So throwing these artificial lures, Miradines or a gulp on a jig head or rig, like a Texas rig style, is working pretty good for these trout. And we'll be able to catch these trout from now until February in similar areas. So deeper waters around canals or up there near the river. People need to focus on the deeper stuff, though, for sure.
Now, let me ask you a question, Tyler. If we get a warm stretch, and it's been pretty warm so far this fall, but in the middle of the winter, if you get a warm stretch, do your fish move up shallow, or do they tend to still stay deep in the winter?
I think they will definitely move. They're not going to go to the on top of the grass or the flat, just because all the bait's gone from there. But they will definitely, a couple of our bayous and stuff have little sandbars and stuff, and you will see them fish stunning up there, in the shallower water. In the canals, though, it's most of them it's just pretty tight, and it's deep in the center. Then it's like almost no water up there near the dock. Sometimes they kind of hang out in the channel still, but in certain situations they'll definitely be on a little bit shallower parts of their stunning. Gotcha.
Okay. Anything from offshore at all?
Yeah, it's been still been a little bit of bottom fishing going on. We got scamp, grouper, gag grouper, and triggerfish until the end of the year. We got a couple weeks left of that, and decent weather day. Run out and fish. For the groupers, you're going to want to fish anywhere from 200 feet to 300 feet of water. Fishing over the natural rock structures that we have. Using live bait if you can find it. There's still a lot of little cigar minnows around. There's some pinfish and that kind of stuff. Take some live bait out there, fish on the bottom on these rock structures, and pick off a few groupers before it ends. But other than that, we had a little bit of a weather window, and a couple of guys caught some tunas and that kind of stuff. It's just been the long run. That's the oil rig run. 100 miles or so. But if you get a weather window and the tunas are biting on some of the closer stuff to Pensacola, so within 100 miles, it's been pretty good.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that doesn't sound too bad for a wintertime report, that's for sure. I tell you what, buddy, I look forward to talking with you next week, if that's okay.
Yep, I'll be here, Rick. We'll see you guys.
Thanks, Captain Tyler Massey out of Pensacola Pass. All right, that wraps up our trip around the state tonight. It was the microcosm of being a fisherman. There are the best of times. Jim Ross celebrating the release of 15,000 new redfish into the area there, and his fishing was also very good. There were some down in 10,000 Islands where Steve Dahl was all crazy about the cobia bite, and it's going well, and they've still got snook because the water's warmer than it should be. But then, bam, West Central is getting hit with a red tide. And I don't know when I've heard Ray Markham sound more discouraged. I sure hope that's not going to be a bad one for them. I think a little chilly water might improve that situation. Florida Sportsman Action Spotter is brought to you this week and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. It's the best chum on earth, all right. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. By Young Boats, you want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. By Castaway Hat Company, the hat that's helping save our seas. And by Academy Sports and Outdoors, right stuff, low price, every day. But there's one thing you can count on. There's always something biting somewhere, and we're going to keep you posted. Till next week, for Florida Sportsman Magazine, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and we'll see you on the rip.